Extreme discipline doesn't make your life better. It makes you unrecognizable. And that is exactly why most people will never sustain it. They say they want change, but what they really want is improvement without confrontation, growth without losing the version of themselves that feels familiar, safe, and socially acceptable. Discipline doesn't work that way. Real discipline dismantles identities. It strips habits. It exposes excuses you've protected for years. Here is the uncomfortable truth. You are not failing because you lack willpower. You are failing because you are still trying to evolve without seeing yourself clearly. Musashi never chased balance, happiness, or motivation. He chased clarity. Brutal clarity. He understood that before you refine skill, before you sharpen action, you must first destroy. Most people skip that step, and they pay for it forever. Look at your days, not the plans, the reality. You wake up tired, not because you worked hard, but because your attention was fragmented. You call it a busy life. In truth, it's a life of constant reaction. Messages, notifications, small hits of stimulation that train your nervous system to obey instead of decide. That constant noise doesn't just steal time, it erodes authority over yourself. Discipline begins the moment you stop negotiating with your weakness. The moment you stop justifying low standards with good intentions. That moment hurts because it forces you to admit something most people avoid their entire lives. You are not as in control as you think. This is not entertainment. This is a line in the sand. If you're here out of curiosity, this video will feel uncomfortable. But if something in you knows that your current rhythm is slowly hollowing you out, then staying here is already an act of discipline. Even subscribing is not about supporting a channel. It's a quiet commitment to exposing yourself to ideas that don't soothe you, but strengthen you. Because the first shock is not realizing you lacked discipline. The real shock is realizing how long you've been avoiding looking at that fact. And once you see it, you don't get to pretend you didn't. You don't fail because you are weak. You fail because your biology was never designed for a sustained discipline. This isn't a character flaw. It's a neurological fact. Your brain is optimized to conserve energy, avoid prolonged discomfort, and chase immediate reward. For most of human history, that kept us alive. In the modern world, it quietly keeps us average. Every time you decide to start tomorrow, it isn't laziness. It's your nervous system choosing the familiar. Every time you quit on day 3, it isn't lack of potential. It's your dopamine system demanding proof that the effort is worth it and not getting it fast enough. Modern life exploits this perfectly. Notifications train reactivity. Endless content trains escape. Comfort trains avoidance. Over time, your brain learns a dangerous rule. Discomfort equals threat. So when discipline shows up, repetition, boredom, friction, your system treats it like something to eliminate, not something to integrate. And here's where most people make the fatal mistake. They try to fight a biological system with motivation. They try to overpower conditioning with inspiration. They try to force discipline without understanding resistance. That never works. Musashi never framed discipline as moral superiority. He framed it as awareness of nature, especially one's own, before strategy, observation, before action, perception. You don't defeat what you refuse to study. There is a quiet arrogance in believing you already know yourself, in believing you've tried everything. Most people haven't tried clarity. They've tried intensity, short bursts of effort fueled by emotion, collapsing under the first sign of friction. Enthusiasm, resistance, negotiation, abandonment. Repeat this cycle enough times and your brain learns something far worse than failure. Quitting brings relief, and anything that brings relief becomes automatic. This is why discipline collapses even in intelligent, capable people. Not because they lack drive, but because they built their lives inside environments that reward distraction and punish focus. Willpower doesn't stand a chance in an ecosystem designed against it. So you blame yourself. You internalize the failure. You assume you're broken. You're fighting a system you were never taught to see. And until you see it, you'll keep replaying the same pattern. Not because you're weak, but because you're predictable. Which leads to the most uncomfortable question of all. What happens if you never interrupt this pattern? Nothing collapses all at once. That's how it traps you. The real damage of indiscipline doesn't show up as failure. It shows up as a life that functions but never deepens. You work, you pay bills, you stay busy, and slowly, almost politely, your edge disappears. If nothing changes, what happens isn't chaos. It's worse. It's normalization. You become efficient at surviving and incompetent at becoming. Your days start running on maintenance mode. You stop pushing because nothing is technically wrong. And when nothing is wrong, there's no urgency, just quiet decay. Here's the alarming discovery. Most people never articulate. Your current pattern is not neutral. It is actively training your future self. Every delay teaches your nervous system patience for stagnation. Every internal negotiation weakens yourself. Every comfort first decision rewrites your identity a little lower. You don't wake up one day undisciplined. You wake up one day conditioned, and conditioning is dangerous because it feels normal. You stop questioning your limits because they've been reinforced so many times they feel factual. Promises you make to yourself lose weight. Goals stop generating energy. Eventually, you stop expecting anything serious from yourself. That's when the psychological cost shows up. Low-grade anxiety with no clear source, irritation you can't explain, the constant sense that you're behind your own potential. This isn't a lack of purpose. It is prolonged misalignment, the gap between who you know you could be and who your habits keep producing. The brain hates that gap, so it numbs it. More distraction, more noise, more consumption, anything to avoid the silence where accountability lives. And here's the brutal part. If this continues long enough, you don't become weaker. You become comfortable with being less. And once comfort attaches to mediocrity, it's incredibly hard to separate them. Not because change is impossible, but because the urgency to change disappears. That's why the cost of inaction compounds invisibly. The longer you wait, the more effort it takes to reverse what has become automatic. Patterns don't break from intention. They break from confrontation. And that confrontation becomes terrifying once you realize what's actually at stake. There comes a point where you're no longer fighting to improve. You're fighting not to slide backward. This is where discipline gets dangerous. Not because it's hard, but because comfort becomes convincing. No one is stopping you now. no external obstacle, no lack of knowledge. The resistance has moved inside. Discipline starts asking for a price. Repetition, boredom, renunciation, silence. Comfort offers something else. Relief, justified relief. Rest disguised as excuses that sound reasonable, even healthy. And then the most destructive phrase appears. Just today. Just today you skip training. Just today you lose focus. Just today you ease off. The problem is not the day. The problem is that the brain does not register exceptions. It registers patterns. Every concession becomes a precedent. Every precedent becomes permission. And slowly, discipline isn't attacked. This is how it dies in capable people, not through rebellion, but erosion. Musashi warned that the most dangerous moment in combat is not when the enemy attacks, but when the warrior relaxes because he believes he has already won. That's when the blade finds its opening. You feel this erosion first in the body, energy becomes inconsistent, effort becomes negotiable, then in the mind, focus shortens, decisions get postponed. Finally, in identity, maybe I'm just not built for this. That thought is the real collapse, not because it's true, but because it feels true when fatigue accumulates. And this fatigue isn't caused by effort, it's caused by constant internal conflict. Knowing what you should do and choosing not to do it drains more energy than discipline ever could. That's why so many people feel exhausted despite doing nothing difficult. This is the escalation, not failure, but fragmentation. Either you build a principle strong enough to decide for you, or you keep deciding everything while tired. And decisions made in fatigue never favor growth. This moment matters more than the beginning, because beginnings are fueled by emotion. This phase is sustained only by identity. Which brings us to the final question. What happens when you stop trying to win discipline and instead accept it as a way of being? There's a moment when the struggle changes shape. Not because it ends, but because you stop resisting what it is. Discipline collapses when you treat it as a temporary tool, something you use to fix your life and then put away. That belief turned every effort into waiting for ease, waiting for relief, waiting for a future version of life that never arrives. What sustains a disciplined person is not hope of rest. It is clarity of identity. Musashi wrote that in the void there is no good and no evil. This isn't poetry, it's precision. The void is the state where you stop arguing with reality. You wake early, not because it's heroic, not because it's hard, but because it asks what you do. You train, you focus, you track, you repeat, not as punishment, as alignment. This is the shift most people never make. Discipline is not something you do against yourself. It is something you do in coherence with who you've decided to be. When you accept that the battle doesn't end, it stops feeling heavy. There is no longer frustration about how long this will last. There is only today's execution, today's honesty, today's resistance met cleanly. The method is simple, but it is not gentle. See yourself clearly, adapt without fantasy. Aim emotional friction at weakness, not at your identity. Remain a student even as you improve, and accept that this path doesn't lead somewhere else. It is the place. Up to this point, something subtle happens. the noise quiets. Anxiety loosens its grip, not because life becomes easier, but because you stop fighting the weight that was always there. You stop chasing motivation and start trusting alignment. Most people spend their lives waiting to feel ready before they act. Discipline begins when you act without needing to feel ready, and accept that this never changes. If you stayed until the end, write Kokoro in the comments, not for visibility, for proof to yourself that you chose awareness over escape at least once today. The question is no longer when it gets easier. The question is, what battle begins now?